Today we are talking about squares, and it seems really simple, bit of a patchwork cliche, but actually squares are fantastic and very versatile, and I don't think I'll ever get tired of making quilts full of squares. My book The Wordsmith has 2 squares quilts which I'm going to be showing you. One of them is an alphabet quilt and it's inspired by needlework samplers, and the other one is a poetry quilt and it says warm, sighing, quiet, settled, and it's all pieced with squares. So if you learn how to piece a square, cut a square accurately, which we're all going to show you in our little videos this month, then you will be well able to create your own really exciting, unique quilt. So don't think squares are boring, because they're not. And here is my block that I've designed especially for you monkeys. Almost an Irish chain. It's got a really strong diagonal. 2-inch finished blocks. These little blocks are 2-inch finished. 12-inch finished altogether. Lots of skill building here. Again, accuracy in cutting, nice little strip piecing method for you all to learn, and really easy to get a good striking result. Quilt out of that would be lovely. So there we are, almost Irish chain. These are the fabrics I've selected for my squares block. As usual, I've gone for my favourite blue and neutral cream colour palette. I'm making mine scrappy, and all that really means is that everything that's going to be pale, I'm going to choose one of these 3 fabrics from. If it wasn't scrappy, I'd just have the pale tone, a mid-tone and a dark tone. So here they are, they're all organised. As you see, I've given them all a good press, and they're all ready now to be cut. I'm going to show you the block again. This is what we're going to be making, as you've seen. I was going to neaten this up, and then I thought it might be quite fun for you to see the rough and ready version, the real version. The simplified method I'm going to show you involves you making stripes. So you're going to piece a pale and a mid stripe, and a mid and a dark stripe, and they will make these units. You're going to piece great big long stripes, and then we're going to subdivide those and sew them together. Now it all become clear, but the cutting instructions that I'm going to show you now are all to do with how much you need to cut and then piece these stripes. So just keep in mind where we're heading, and all will be well. Start cutting the pale and the mid-tone strips now. We want the squares to be 2 inches finished. So we're going to first cut 2.5-inch wide strips, so that's 1/4 inch seam allowance for each side. So 2.5. Just going to line that up as best I can, get everything nice and straight. You should see I'm cutting both fabrics at the same time. Just make another one of those. That's all our cutting done for the moment. So I've got 4 of this print. They're 2.5-inch squares, 2.5-inch wide cuts of the pale cream, the mid-tone, and the dark accent. Now what we've got to do, we're going to piece these long stripes that I was telling you about, and we actually need the cream and the blue, the pale blue, the mid, to be an 18.5-inch long strip when it's pieced. So again, depending on how long your fabric is, you might have a seam. I'm going to have a seam, or I'm going to have to make it in 2 pieces. It's not a problem. And then this one, which is the mid and the dark, we actually need to be 12.5 inches long, because we're going to subdivide those into 6 squares, and these we're going to need 9 of them for our block. Okay, pretty sides together. Don't worry about lining. I didn't cut that across, it'll be all right, don't worry about it. Pretty sides together, and then we're going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance down here, pretty sides together with the cream and the blue. Okay, just line them up as best you can. Quarter inch seam allowance all the way down. So we're just piecing, just making stripes, that's all we're doing. They're ready. Sewing machine. piece strips there. 1/4 inch seam allowance, pressed open. That's just my preference. I think it gives you a nice flat finish. Looks really nice. These are ready now to subdivide, and again they want to be 2 inch finished squares. So we're making pairs of squares really, but you're going to cut them at 2.5 inches. So they're going to be subdivided. Let's move these out of the way before I chop into those as well. Again, ruler. This whole method is just a bit of time saving, and it helps with a spot of accuracy as well, because obviously there's less individual parts to move around, and this is a nice sort of sturdy block now that we've made. I'm going to have to subdivide all of this fabric to make these squares. Let's do a couple and then I can show you how we're going to use them, and then hopefully it will all become clear. So here we are. It's a really, really easy way of making little checks. This is really good for Irish chains. It's very efficient. Piece up any long strips and subdivide them. Remember that you need your seam allowances on. There you go. That's what we've got to do. We've just got to repeat that now for the rest of the cream and the pale squares, and then the dark squares. And we need a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pale and mid units, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mid and dark units, and they're all going to come from the strips that we've subdivided. Now it's time for the best bit. We get to play with our units now. We can lay them out into the block that we want, row by row. If you've got any print that sort of looks directional, try and keep an eye on that if you want, or you can keep it scrappy. I'm just laying it out. So that's our first row. So the finished block will be 12 inches square. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. And we just go along and lay out our squares. You can see how useful these little units are. It's very satisfying putting those down. There we go. Yeah, this always looks worrying, doesn't it? But that's because there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance hiding there. Every time, even though I've done this hundreds of times, I still think, what's gone wrong? Something's gone wrong. Nothing's gone wrong. Okay. Again, we've got these two here, one of each. Building a nice stripe, diagonal stripe across. Again, this is just my suggestion for the block. Once you've made these units, it's really up to you where you put them. You know, you might decide when you're playing that you'd like a different layout, and if that's the case, why not go for it? Have I done that right? So I have no 2 cream. Just talking to myself. Here you go, 2 cream blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just finished laying out all the pieces. Now it's always a bit hard to see where you're at this stage. It's hard. You need to give a really good check whether you've got the effect that you want. We've got really strong central line with the mids either side, and then the mid diagonal that way, and then these scrappier squares. Okay, now we're ready to sew them together. What you do is you can chain piece, starting from the bottom. You want to do pretty sides together. Put that one there. Pretty sides together. And here, this is the side we'll be sewing first of all. And then you want to put that one on there so that the bottom stays on the bottom. Put sides together. That. This is just a pair. Okay. This one. This one. Now here I'm going to put a pin with a green top, and that shows me that that is my top. Left, that's my start. It's very easy to get in a muddle. Like this. Okay, that's the first set, so I know that is the top row and the bottom rows on the bottom. And you can do the same here. You can take your red topped pin and put it here, and you know that is bottom right of your block, and it just helps you work out and remember where everything is when they all start looking the same once you've got them all piled up. Next step, take these to the sewing machine. We're going to sew the groups together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, press them open and bring them back to the mat to lay out, and make sure that we're placing the next units in the right place so we can sew the rest together. Back from the sewing machine and the ironing board now, ready to add the next ones in. So again, pretty sides together. Some rows will be nearly finished, which should be very nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue piecing our rows together. When we've got our rows stitched together and pressed, we'll be able to start piecing and finishing the rest of the block. It's just a very methodical process. Very calming and simple. There we go. So that's my edges to be sewn. We're ready for the sewing machine. Really like this stage. So I've got all my rows pieced together, and our next step is of course to piece the rows into the block. So again, it's exactly the same as we've done before. You're going to do pretty sides together, match them up as best you can. Now I'm going to show you quickly how I would do some piecing. You can either just butt the seams up against each other and hope for the best, which is absolutely fine, or you can take a pin and you're going to put, there's always threads, isn't there? You're going to put about 1/4 inch down between there, about 1/4 inch down, again exactly where you want your squares to line up. Juggle them about so they sit nice and flat, and then you can pin down, and then you know that that seam is going to stay where it is, and you repeat that for the whole length, and you make them fit, and they will, because you've cut them and you've sewn them with the same seam allowance, so all will be well. So back to the sewing machine. 3 pieces now, and again just going to repeat the process, pretty sides together. We'll finish up our sewing. Sew along there, 1/4 inch. Again, look at how lovely and neat those open seams are. They make me happy. And there's our finished square block. Isn't that nice? Very satisfying, very easy. I really hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me, and looking forward to the next time.